Good morning. I'm Karen Morgan here with City Council member Jeslin Shahrezaei.
Yeah,
And I did practice. I'm sorry. I'm horrible with names. Thank you for your patience. Thank you for making time to talk with us this morning. I reached out to you recently because I was still catching up on the Moms Demand Action issue, and I wanted to kind of settle some rumors while it was in my head. And so you were good enough to confirm that they were rumors, that there was nothing going on there. And and that just helps. You know, sometimes the rumors take on a life of their own, who's doing what. So thanks for doing that.
Yeah, and I saw your post on the site. I appreciate efforts to support, refuting misinformation that's out there. And I think that this, especially with the sort of contentiousness around this topic, I think any effort to make sure that we're sharing factual information is incredibly helpful. So appreciate your work on that.
Well, there was a lot of factual information presented that night at the meeting. What did you think about that? That was what, close to 2 hours for both sides?
Close to 2 hours. So yeah, I thought that it's a topic that obviously promotes participation across the community. I thought that, appreciate any opportunities that community members take out of their time, out of their busy schedules, to come and give public comment. I will note that I thought it was really interesting that there was sort of folks from really outside of the community that came and spoke in favor of sort of maintaining the status quo around our gun control issues in Lakewood. And so when you started to hear people share where they're coming from in the community, the majority of folks who had strong opinions opposing what Moms Demand Action were suggesting really weren't Lakewood residents. And so I think that that's an important piece for us to think about as we move forward and we do some goal setting. I don't know what that will look like for 2023, but it's important that we hear from all sorts of people in and outside of the community. But, I'm really paying close attention to who's here in Lakewood and has like a day-to-day impact on sort of the decisions that are being made at the city council level.
Do you think this is going to be an issue City Council is interested in looking at?
I think we just saw some information come out where, a lot of Jeffco communities have not taken up this, Moms Demand Action, similar to what you saw from your core requests. They were making that their rounds across Jefferson County. And a lot of the municipalities haven't really taken up an effort on this. And so I think that there's an opportunity for Lakewood to maybe discuss this. I don't know if there's an appetite with City Council for this. I think we've heard clearly from some members of council a desire to not do that. But I think that the conversation is one worth having. I don't know what the timing of that will look like. But I do think that Lakewood being sort of the county seat would have a dramatic impact on what maybe some of our neighbors in the county would consider. And there's an opportunity for us to be a leader one way or another on this topic. And so I think that the planning retreat that's coming up at the end of this month will be very telling for sort of what next steps would look like. But I don't think anybody's gotten that far. As I shared before we started recording, I'm just coming off of a long break, so I'm sort of gathering my thoughts. I'm encouraging constituents to reach out to me. I'd love to hear what you all want to see as priorities. That really is what this should be for the planning retreat, is us driving forward things that are important to the community. And so again, going back to who was in the audience that night, that was a lot of Lakewood residents that night.
Well, I agree with you. That would be a wonderful way if people would participate and let you know what to put into the annual retreat. That's a full day. That's another long day of work for you also. Appreciate it. Well, this, like I said, I kind of started talking to you about an old issue in the middle of a new issue. And so can I ask you about going back to the December meetings on the city manager kind of contract negotiations? And first of all, the big hubbub there was counselors who felt like they were muted and not allowed to speak. What do you think about that? Do you think they were allowed?
I think that there's been an oversimplification of this process. I think it's not as black and white as people's free speech being dismantled through muting. I think that what we're seeing sort of unfold is a lack of sort of any ability to communicate effectively. And we've got some city council members who self-certified as being disruptors in this process. And so for me, I feel frustrated when at every turn we are hosting meetings where people are using their platform to elevate agendas that have nothing to do with the topic. And I think that the city manager's negotiation was a great example of that. There were some comments from other counselors that myself and Councilor Mayotte Guerrero weren't muted and others were. And I think that the major difference there was that we kept to what the topic was. We were talking solely about the contract, and others who were being muted were really taking, shots at a personnel matter that should have been happening under executive session per charter. And I think had people taken the steps to participate in the process as it's outlined, we had an executive session, there was a vote, you've outlined all this on your website. They made a decision to not have that executive session. They wanted to have this discussion publicly. That still doesn't negate the fact that we can't be talking about personnel publicly like that for liability issues. And I think that that's where things got a little bumpy. I just don't think it's as easy as saying we shouldn't be muting people. We should be muting people. First Amendment should cover everyone and people should have the ability to speak. I do think that the mayor has a tough job of sort of keeping control of a meeting. If you're watching, and I know that you are, there's no way you couldn't possibly be missing how easily we've slipped out of control in recent months, and sort of how effective is this in governing? And I just, for me, you've alluded to this a few times, we're all busy, time is of the essence. Some of us are working full-time jobs. I'm a parent, I have a full-time job, I have other responsibilities in the community. And so when I come to city council meetings and study sessions, I want to make sure that we're using our time effectively and on topic. And I think that we often are getting off topic. And so when the mute function is being used to sort of bring us back, I think that is an important tool. I think in a hybrid world, it's really murky waters that we're navigating. But I do think ultimately everyone has the right to their opinion and they should be able to speak. And I don't know that I necessarily agree that that's not what we're seeing. I think Councilor Abel did a great job sort of being mindful of what the topic was at the December 19th meeting. He didn't take shots at personnel. He was really talking about the process. That's appropriate to me. And so I think that he was asked to come back and sort of finish his remarks. And I think it looked a little bit different for others who maybe weren't on topic.
I would agree with you that there was a lot of things going on. For example, you heard Councilor Abel say he did feel like he was muted because he did return to that topic and he wanted to return to the process of the executive session, or how to be talking, discussing what was going on here, and he wasn't able to finish that. Can you tell me anything about that discussion? So if that is the process of, when do you feel like the discussion should have happened?
I think if people wanted to unwind some conversations around the person in question that was their contract was being renewed, the appropriate time for that would have been in a special executive session, which was scheduled for the December 5th meeting. I think what's tricky though is that there were members of council who voted against the December 5th special executive session who also chose not to participate in the annual evaluation. So without their participation in a process that was clearly lined out, clearly participated in with the majority of folks, without their participation, it becomes really easy for them to come back later and say, I call BS on this. I don't agree with this. But there was a process that was laid out, and none of us have participated in this. Even Councilor Abel, other longtime community members that are on council, because this is a 2014 contract. So this predates anybody that's on council right now. So I think it's hard for us to say, like, this is what it should look like. This is what it has looked like. Nobody's ever gone through this process before. That's one piece. And the evaluation process, there was consensus that this staff member was doing a good job. That's where we got to the bonus, which is another contentious issue. So when you come back, 5 months later, 7 months later, saying, we don't agree, we don't think this person is doing a good job. We had some council members who wanted us to bring other candidates into the process. Like, that's not what we were asked to do. We were asked to renew a contract because earlier in the year, we had found consensus that the staff member was doing a job that was well enough to continue their service to the community. And so if you're not willing to participate in the whole process and you come in at the end and you disrupt it, I find that challenging. And I would ask you, as a community member, do you feel satisfied with sort of the representation you're seeing from your city councilors? Like, when you watch these unravelings online and in these council meetings, how does that make you feel as a community member?
I think everyone did an admirable job. I think that this was a time for discussion what was going on in the contract, and all of those points were points that could have gone into a contract. So that's why I guess I'm hearing, and so to clarify again, it's not the evaluation process, because in my opinion, I didn't hear anybody disparaging. It wasn't a personnel discussion. There was discussions about the process and how to go forward in here. But that discussion was not taken up. So, for example, Councilor Oliver brought up, can we write into this contract a process? Councilor Abel brought up, can we make sure that these accountability factors were in the contract? And those items were not brought up for discussion. They were brought up, but they were not discussed. It appeared to be that this was a presentation, and that we were going to do upbound. We weren't going to vote on, we weren't going to discuss any of those options. So that's what I'm wondering. Where was that? So do you think that those were not discussed because they were brought up in what ended up to be a very antagonistic manner?
Hmm.
Or was it just that you don't feel the ideas were good enough to merit discussion? Because that discussion piece was missing.
I felt satisfied with the contract. I felt that the contract didn't ask for anything that was sort of above and beyond what was okay in my mind. And so for that reason, I didn't push forward the idea of a discussion, because in my mind, I felt satisfied. To Councilor Abel's point, as I understand it and rereading it, I still understand the same way. I saw you send an email last night asking for some more information about the contract. What we approved on December 19th was an amendment to the contract. So those deliverables still remain in effect. Those sort of examples of things that the city manager could be held accountable for, that doesn't change. The only amendments are what we voted on, which would be in addition to the original 2014 contract, which I guess is actually 2009 contract. So those don't change. I don't think that, I think that question was answered that evening. Councilor Abel wanted to know what sort of measurements would we be sure that there is a process. What are we measuring success for when we do an annual evaluation? I thought that was a good question. It was answered. And for those reasons, I didn't think that there was a reason for us to further discuss the contract process. I trusted the ability of the mayor and the mayor pro temp to sort of operate in that process. And I think that's the difference, is that I don't wake up every morning wondering how staff are, wondering how they're going to unseat the city of Lakewood. I don't have this idea that there's mischievous ways amongst our staff. And I know some councilors do. And I also trust that the direction for the mayor and the mayor pro temp was, please renegotiate a contract that would be securing this position for the future. We want the city manager to stay in this position, and in a way that is, providing incentives that aren't outside of what is acceptable. And I think that was accomplished. And so Were people coming into that meeting ready to poke holes into whatever was presented? I think so. I think that's pretty much how you see most meetings operating with a couple of members of city council. And that's where I get frustrated, and why I appreciate you giving me the time to talk today. Is just there's work to be done, like real work to be done. And this was not the moment I think that maybe it was being presented as. We'd already found consensus as a council. And just a reminder that there's nobody with power solely as one individual. We have only power as a council, and we made a decision as a group that we wanted to keep this person in this position, that we wanted to find a contract suitable for incentives for them and for the city of Lakewood. And those things were accomplished. And so when people don't participate in the whole process, it's easy to come at the end and say, this is wrong. There's something that didn't add up here. And I think for that to happen publicly was unfortunate, because now we're having to go back and share with community members, here's what that looked like.
Okay. Okay. So it was not so much either way for you on the ideas and the discussion. Just the discussion didn't need to be had at this point.
In my opinion, it didn't. If others were ready to come with some talking points, that information had been available. So share, point 4C, I didn't love, like there was none of that. It was just it seemed like a lack of preparedness to talk about what was the issue. If the process is a problem, that's a separate conversation. The contract was what we were asked to vote on that night. If we need to have a discussion about the process, let's do that. Maybe not the way that we did it on December 19th. That wasn't a fruitful interaction at all. But I think that those are two separate things, and that what we were asked to do, what the agenda was requesting of us, was to vote yes or no on the extension of the city manager's contract. And that's what we did. Okay.
And I missed that. You think like the agenda, that's what I was missing. What suggested that you only have an up-down vote and you couldn't make suggestions or revisions to that? So thank you. That to go back then to the December 5th meeting, because some of the controversy was that there was not enough time to prepare for that. You were only given the information very right before the meeting, and you didn't have time to prepare, or some people didn't have time to prepare for an active discussion. Mayor Paul said that he would present the information in that meeting, and then you could just, and that would be a discussion point, but you would have been able to enter in that meeting in December 5th, the same as the December 19th meeting, because it came from an area of trust in the mayor and the mayor pro tem presenting you a good option.
And we could have had a discussion there if people were reviewing it. And to be clear, that is not outside of how it usually operates. For example, when we were making decisions about appointing the presiding judge, we didn't receive those hiring packages until that night. So time is given that night to read, ask questions. Sure, maybe that doesn't work for everyone, but you have to come ready to do that work. And folks were not willing to do that. I only have a body of evidence that goes back the last 12 months. From what I've seen, this is exactly how every executive session has been handled. You come in, you're given a binder, you're given time at the start of the meeting to review it and to ask questions. For us to have an executive session after 12 months of doing it this way and saying, this is not how we do it, we need time to review it, that's never how we've done it before. It makes it really easy for the community to misunderstand why would you not give that information? But in every other executive session dealing with personnel, that is how we've done it. So it seems like there's a bit of fanning flames of mistrust in a place that didn't need to be happening.